Okay guys, I'm back, so here's the rest of the story. So yeah, like after Sailor John starts pointing fingers at Thomas, and of course the fact they have to leave now that it's daylight, he starts sailing away in skiff, and while that's happening, Marion was sleeping over in a cove, like right in the siding after she actually managed to find the treasure earlier. So yeah, I almost forgot, I think I mentioned that. Alright, so yes. While Thomas starts puffing away depressed, he runs into Marion, and Marion, of course, tries to play that guess what's in my shovel game, and accidentally drops the whole treasure chest all over Thomas, and of course, like, after that happens, the Fat Controller starts congratulating her for finding the treasure, and after that, he even decides to send the treasure over to the Sodor Museum. So, yeah. After, Thomas, of course, starts feeling depressed now the Fat Controller is proud of Marion and even Ryan. Like, he's basically just depressed that the Fat Controller, isn't showing any more favoritism towards him. So, yeah. After he leaves, like, basically, because he sends Ryan to go collect more dynamite from Brendam Docks, but he still, disgraces Thomas and sends him to go over to Whiff's waste dump to deliver some construction waste. So, yeah, like, he keeps demoting Thomas, like, he's not going through a very good time. And now, I do feel very sorry for him. Like, we see, like, throughout the whole, like, at the beginning, when Thomas was just being a mischievous and cheeky and, stubborn little jerk, like, now, you can't help but feel sorry for him. And I do feel disappointed that the Fat Controller, well, okay, obviously, because, Thomas is still in trouble, but, well, we'll get to that later. So, yeah, while Thomas is leaving towards the waste dump, he runs into Henry, who, of course, has actually just witnessed Sailor John and Skiff, and at this point, he still believes that the both of them are ghosts after Salty's story. So yeah, Thomas runs into both Sailor John and Skiff, and Sailor John starts threatening him to give him the treasure. I mean, I can't resist the classic line, "Where's my treasure?" I couldn't resist. So yeah, like Thomas tells, Sailor John that the Fat Controller is giving the treasure to the museum, and that of course enrages him, as this is where we now learn that Sailor John really is the villain in this. Like, this is where Thomas starts realizing Sailor John's true intentions, that all this time, he was basically just using him, just to help him with his own dirty work. And the same goes for Skiff. As I said earlier, Skiff has no idea that Sailor John is really this all-out horrible person. I mean, in fact, throughout the movie, like, Sailor John is actually very abusive towards Skiff. Yeah, like, there's boat abuse in this film, yeah. Like, that's something to go along with the moral of know who your friends are and aren't. Like, something to teach kids, as Sailor John is very abusive towards him, and I know that may be a bit disturbing, yes, but hey, we've seen villains like these before, even in kids' films. So, yeah. Like, this could give children an idea, that there are horrible people in the world, like Sailor John. Yes, so basically we learn that all this time, Sailor John, he really wanted the treasure for himself. Like, as Skiff points out, that he said he was always going to give it to the museum, but it turns out that Sailor John was basically just playing both Skiff and Thomas for fools. Like, all along. Like, as he was basically just, a greedy pirate. Like, and I will just talk about Sailor John at this point in the movie, yeah. So, you guys are going to ask me, what do I think of Sailor John as a villain? I gotta say, he's actually handled very well as a villain. Like, heck, I'm surprised that we have a villain like this in Thomas the Tank Engine. Like, I mean, he is hands down the classic villain. Vicious, conniving, scheming, lying, malicious. Even though, like, it was predictable, at early, like I said, that he was going to be the villain. But now, here, we get the idea that we now see him for the true scum that he really is. Like, but how would I compare him to, you know, classic Thomas villains like Diesel 10, for say, or Diesel? Like, compared to, like, Diesel or Diesel 10, well, actually, like, Diesel is just as malicious, I know, but Diesel 10, who, of course, is the ultimate, like, bad guy in Thomas the Tank Engine, yeah, like, the ultimate bad guy in Thomas the Tank Engine, like, Sailor John, I would say, definitely, you know, has that ruthless, you know, personality that Diesel 10 has, but also more of that comical, you know, personality that he did. So, yeah, like, and I know plenty of us, like Thomas fans, have also compared him to P.T. Boomer from the original director's cut of Thomas and the Magic Railroad, but apparently he never made it into the cut because of, you know, the stupid test audiences thinking that he'd be too scary for kids. But here we have a human villain who I guess may be too scary for kids, but still, you know, is toned down to at least be comical enough to enjoy him. I mean, he is that enjoyable, and I am impressed at how we have a human villain like him in Thomas, even though he could have been the second human villain, like, if, you know, P.T. Boomer was in Magic Railroad, but apparently that never happened. So yeah, here we have Sailor John, who I gotta say is the best human villain we have so far. And I don't like the animation. Yeah, I never mentioned this either, you know, that well, that the animation for Sailor John, like, is handled very well. Like, it's so, like, motion capture X, like, something you'd see in, like, motion capture films, like the Polar Express, or the Tintin film, yeah. So, yes. That's Sailor John for you, and but there is just one problem that I have with him, to say the least, is we don't really know exactly why he wants... Okay, we understand he wants it for himself and that he's basically just a greedy bastard. But the only problem is that we don't know how he's really fits in with this. Like, how does he fit in with this whole pirate stuff? Like, in terms of stealing the treasure. Like, maybe he's like a descendant of Captain Cowles, or... Yeah, it's just an assumption that I was thinking of. Though there is one, like... Well, here's this one history that we've learned from the Thomas and Friends website about Sailor John, and that is he originally was kicked out of the Navy. Yeah, that's surprising. He was kicked out of the Navy and ended up becoming a life of crime on Sodor, but they don't really elaborate on that. Unless they have, like, this episode where Skiff tells Thomas or any of the other engines a backstory of how he and Sailor John came to be and all that stuff. So, yeah. Okay, so that's basically Sailor John in a nutshell. And, like, at that moment, he still tries to threaten Thomas to give him the treasure, but Thomas tells him, of course, that the treasure never belonged to him or the pirates, as it was stolen, and he actually, of course, Thomas starts to realize, you know, of course, who Sailor John really is, and that he was just using him the whole time. So he basically shunts Skiff right into a siding, and basically leaves from there. Skiff, on the other hand, of course, you know, he's not really at all evil as Sailor John is. Like, he's still loyal to Thomas rather than resentful. And he starts realizing that Sailor John, who of course was treating him badly throughout the whole film, I mean... Yeah, I mean, you know where this is going, so... And it was pretty funny, like, when Thomas leaves, and then Sailor John, of course, starts whining like a spoiled brat. It's like, I want my treasure. Gotta admit, it was pretty funny where he's, like, just whining like a spoiled brat. Yeah, just kind of like that comical, you know, level that Diesel 10 had in Magic Railroad. So, yeah, after Thomas, you know, comes back from the waste dump and passes by at Knapford Station, he overhears Sir Topham Hatt in his office on the phone, learning that the treasure was stolen, where he's learning the history of the treasure, and you gotta admit, it is kind of funny where the Fat Controller is just kneeling like that in his office, like a certain businessman, like Ah, 16th century, you say, and then he's just fooling around with the treasure. So, yeah, like, after he learns about the stolen treasure, he decides that to keep it protected by having it locked up in his safe. Yeah, not a very smart idea there. Yeah. So, of course, Thomas, of course, realizes that's not a smart idea, but, of course, seeing that the Fat Controller is still disappointed with him, he can't tell him now, can he? So, yeah, Thomas decides to take matters into his own buffers by actually trying to keep a lookout for Sailor John and to stop him from stealing the treasure. So yeah, before he goes, back at like the Harwick construction site, like Ryan, he meets up with Ryan, and at this point, Thomas starts to, drop his grudge against him. Like, he gets over it, and they even apologize. Like, Ryan apologizes for getting Thomas punished with the for getting Thomas in trouble with the Fat Controller over the dynamite. And Thomas apologizes for not warning Ryan about the bad coal, and at this point, Thomas and Ryan start becoming friends. Whoopee. I'm just saying, that's actually good. Like, Thomas starts, like, letting go of his grudge, basically, and though, when Ryan does offer to let him in the shed, Thomas, like, he declines, basically. Sorry for my speech there. So, Thomas declines, but not because he hates Ryan anymore. No, but it's really just to keep a lookout for Sailor John. Of course, Ryan doesn't really know that when Thomas says, just in case, but he doesn't exactly tell Ryan, about Sailor John. So yeah, that night when Thomas is over at Knapford Station, like he, is keeping a lookout, but he falls asleep in the middle of it. Yeah, not very smart. So yeah, while Thomas is asleep, Sailor John sneaks along in skiff over at Knapford Station to try and steal the treasure, and of course he actually makes it to the Fat Controller's office. Yeah, I'm calling him that at the point. So he makes it to the Fat Controller's office, and he breaks in by using a stick of dynamite to blow it up. What the? Holy crap! He just blows up the office. Who didn't see that coming? Heck, I didn't see that coming myself. So yeah, after he blows up the office, he actually makes off with the treasure in Skiff and actually gets away. And of course, Skiff at this point, starts seeing that Sailor John is, of course, this horrible, dirtbag. But Sailor John, keeps, abusing him and keeps telling him, to just sail on and all that stuff. But Thomas, of course, at this point finally wakes up, until now. But it gets even worse from there, as, of course, he's been asleep all this time, that his firebox has gone out. So, while Thomas's fireman is trying to relit the fire, Sailor John, starts getting away, and starts cackling evilly. Yeah, I gotta say, that's something else. His cackle, Sailor John's cackle, is definitely very creepy. But I'm not saying that in a bad way. No, I mean in a good way creepy. Because, that's the one, famous part in the villain. A really good evil laugh. So, yeah, that night when the other engines are asleep in tin sheds, Henry starts running past as he still thinks that both Sailor John and Skiff are ghosts. And, of course, Sailor John races past, and even Annie and Clarabelle, who are asleep on the siding next to the sheds, think that they're having a strange dream. But when Thomas, races by, of course, as Annie and Clarabelle do have that bond with him, as Thomas races by, they basically start to wake up. Sorry about that. I was trying to, think of what I was going to say. So yeah, Thomas tries chasing after the villain, and in the midst of it all, he does have a few problems, almost having a near collision with Gordon, and as he races right through a tunnel, he starts seeing that Sailor John actually managed to commandeer the same pirate ship that was over at Allsburg Harbor. So yeah, how did he do that? I have no idea, and I don't think we'll ever know, but yeah, Sailor John, I'm pretty sure that earlier, where at the scene where Thomas comes back from the steamworks and is aggravated about Rocky taking the credit for his find, like, oh, excuse me, that was my toe, yeah. Like, I'm pretty sure that on that scene earlier when Sailor John was on the ship, he may have been able to make some modifications to it so that way he could get away. So yeah, he basically uses the pirate ship, since it has a larger amount of sail power to, get away with Skiff tied at the very end, like, if he was a tugboat at the end. So yeah, that is a problem, as the ship is just way too fast for Thomas to catch up. Though, why would Sailor John, steal the pirate ship? I guess maybe he just wanted to fulfill his reputation as a pirate, or maybe he just wanted to, make a big profit out of the ship as well, so that way he'd be, well, like, filthy rich, to say. So, yeah. So, basically, while Thomas is trying to chase after him, like, meanwhile, back at Arlesburg Junction, Ryan, of course, is awake and puffing out in the middle of the night, still curious at why Thomas, was sleeping over at Knapford. I'm sorry. Here's what I meant to say. So, yeah, Ryan, of course, is still, wondering about what Thomas was worried about. And then, of course, he starts realizing this at the very moment when Sailor John starts racing past in the pirate ship. And this, of course, startles the Arlesburg engines, and who were also awake, and their drivers were with them as well. I guess maybe to get them prepared for work or something? Yeah, because they're awake too. So, yeah, like, Thomas shouts out for Rex, Mike, and Bert to stop the pirate ship, and, like, they actually managed to do so by shunting all of their ballast hoppers from, like, the top of the chute right off of the siding and onto the standard gauge track, where, of course, like, the pirate ship does bump into it, except it doesn't really stop it, but it does manage to slow it down. And while that's all happening, one of the ropes on the pirate ship starts coming loose, and Ryan, who of course starts puffing in reverse, like, the rope manages to, like, snag onto Ryan's buffer, kind of like in Old Iron, with Edward, trying to stop James. Like, Ryan manages to apply his brakes, and he crashes right over, well, he doesn't crash, like, he stops right over in a siding, which causes the pirate ship to capsize, but Sailor John, of course, still gets away inside Skiff. So, yeah. So, yeah, while the pirate ship, is stopped, all thanks to Rex, Mike, Bert, and Ryan, Thomas, of course, still has to try and stop Skiff in order to stop Sailor John and get the treasure back. And meanwhile, back in Arlesburg Village, this is where we get to the best. Yeah, like, the scene where the small railway engines and Ryan helped stop the ship was awesome, I will say. But this is even more awesome, where basically, like, Thomas is trying, like, let's face it, I mean, when I first saw this in the trailer, I was like, holy crap. I mean, like, let's face it, it's Thomas the Tank Engine. Like, it's Thomas the Tank Engine chasing after a dreaded pirate that's actually throwing shit at him. Like, he throws, like, many stuff. Like, he throws, like, the shovel, an anchor, and heck, he even throws a stick of freaking dynamite. No, I'm serious. He actually tries to throw dynamite at Thomas the Tank Engine. Like, who would ever thought that we'd ever have something like this in Thomas the Tank Engine at all? So yeah, like, Thomas tries, like, Sailor John is about to, like, kill Thomas with the dynamite, but Skiff actually manages to save him by swaying from side to side, which, of course, causes Sailor John to lose grip of the dynamite, causing it to explode already. And Thomas, of course, tries, to save Skiff from the treasure, but he accidentally bumps Skiff onto another line, and Thomas goes onto another line as well. Yeah. Plot convenience. So, yes. Sailor John makes a break for it still, while even making a very lame pun. Yeah, lame puns, basically. Like, he basically, says, it's been a blast, but he also says, I'll always treasure the good times we had. Yeah, he actually says that, but it's actually kind of funny. I mean, lame puns in Thomas the Tank Engine. So, yeah. While Sailor John makes a break for it in Skiff, Thomas, of course, starts seeing that there is another, line that could lead over to this crossing, so that way he can try, prevent Sailor John and Skiff from making a break for it. As I've already said too many times, sorry. So, yeah, while that's happening, I've also noticed, like, is it me or do we even hear, like, some Harry Potter music? Yeah, like, we actually do hear some, like, Harry Potter music, like, in this. And I get it, like, we do have two Harry Potter actors, Jamie Campbell Bower and John Hurt, who, of course, were in the Harry Potter films. And now we actually do hear part of, like, the Quidditch theme, like, dun 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 na 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 na. Yeah, you get the point. And like you think to yourselves like, oh wait, I've heard this in Harry Potter, and of course they're making that obvious, seeing that we do have two Harry Potter actors in this movie. So yeah, Thomas, of course, like he does, manage to come over to the crossing, and he actually manages to bump Sailor John, and now here's the question of why Skiff was smiling, when Thomas was, bumping him. Like, he's actually, glad that Thomas is able to stop him. Oh, hold on a sec. Sorry about that, guys. Just a little business to take care of. So, yes. At this point, like, Thomas, like, he bumps, Skiff and Sailor John, like, right on to the same track he is. Onto the same track that he's on. And, of course, Thomas thinks, like, I'll be able to stop him, but it gets even worse as he's not watching where he's going, and he ends up down the bay at Arlesborough Harbor, and, by mistake, he ends up plunging right into the ocean, unable to catch our villain. So, yes, while Sailor John is still escaping, of course, Skip, tries to, get his boss to, or former boss, as now he's had enough of Sailor John, Like, of course, Skiff is now fully aware, for the true scum that Sailor John truly is. But Sailor John, of course, threatens to, break him into pieces if he still thinks about helping Thomas or tries to, stand up to him. But then, it gets even worse where, of course, the water, starts, like the wave starts splashing them around. And, of course, that all happens because the treasure is just way too heavy for Skiff to carry. But Sailor John, of course, is too stubborn to listen to Skiff and still threatens to, like, he still keeps threatening him to, do his dirty work. But did I say Sailor John? Yeah, so, yeah, Skiff, who now sees the true scum that Sailor John truly is, and finally has enough of his, attitude towards him, like, is able to use a wave to be able to capsize himself, causing both Sailor John and the treasure to fall right out and into the ocean. And I gotta say, that very scene also would sum up how great Art Productions animation is, and also how great Robert and Peter Hartshorn are at the music, as well as the City of Prague's orchestra. Like, it's just amazing. Like, the very scene where Sailor John is trying to get the treasure from out right under the sea, but he can't be able to because it's too heavy, so he's like, there's no use. I can't get it out. So, yeah, like, it's not even, so he can't be able to, get the treasure out because of its weight. So, at this point, now he gives up. So, yeah, like, the animation, like, right under the water is just amazing. And we even hear a choir, like, I mean, hands down, the choir, I'd really give them a thumbs up here, because, like, I never thought they would actually, I never expect they would do that in Thomas the Tank Engine. So, yeah, like, the choir, like, they did a really good job. So, yeah, back on the surface where Thomas is worried that both Skiff and... Sorry, that Skiff is dead. Like, Skiff manages to bob up to the surface, safe, and Sailor John manages to bob up as well. And, of course, after that all happens, just right in daylight, Sailor John is finally busted when the police arrive on board Captain. And you gotta admit, it's pretty funny where, you know, the cops where Sailor John is caught red-handed by the police, and, like, the cop is like, sorry, like, and the head police officer is like, hello, 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 what do we got here? Kind of making a reference to the Season 4 episode Steamroller. But Sailor John, of course, tries playing innocent, but it gets even funnier where, like, the cop says, tell it to the judge, which I'm like, holy crap, like, I never thought they'd hear them say that in Thomas. Yeah, like, all this stuff that I'm saying, like, where it's like, I never thought I'd hear that in Thomas. Like, I never thought, seeing that now Thomas is in CGI, they could pretty much do whatever they want. And, like, the scene where, like, they say tell it to the judge, I'm just, like, laughing. I mean, it's just so freaking hilarious that we'd ever hear something like that in Thomas. So, yeah, while Sailor John is being arrested, Thomas, on the other hand, is hauled out of the sea by Rocky and loaded onto a flatbed. And now the Fat Controller, of course, arrives at the very scene. And Thomas, of course, this time, now he starts admitting responsibility, saying that this was all his fault, and tries to apologize as he can. But this time, now it's vice versa, where the Fat Controller is not pissed off with him. This time, he's now proud of him. And I'm like, oh, so now you're proud of your own engine this time. Yeah. So basically, he was able to not jump to conclusions, as Ryan has been able to tell him everything as he shows up at the scene. So, yeah, like, at this point, the Fat Controller now congratulates Thomas for, you know, his brave efforts in trying to stop Sailor John from getting away. Though Thomas still feels, you know, that he let him down for not trying to, you know, save the treasure. But the Fat Controller actually... Hold on a sec. Okay, so yeah. So when Thomas does try to apologize, yeah, just, my folks were talking upstairs and that was getting disturbing. So, yes, while Thomas, you know, does try to apologize, the Fat Controller, you know, tells him that in the end, that his engines are really much more important to him than anything, and I like that. I mean, it just shows you the Fat Controller really is a kind-hearted, fatherly figure to the engines. I mean, fatherly figure, my bad. Okay, so, yeah, I mean, like, he could have said that earlier with the dynamite, and geez, I hope Ryan did tell him, you know, about the dynamite incident, because I really wish they had a scene where the Fat Controller apologizes for making Thomas feel like he's neglecting him, and for thinking that he was causing trouble with the dynamite incident. I hope. I mean, he did say Ryan told him everything. I really hope he did tell him everything. But yeah, none of that matters. I'll talk about that later. So, yes. Of course, he does assure him that he really is the number one. And then, of course, after that's all settled, everything works out, and Thomas, of course, his name is basically just cleared. So yeah, I'll talk about this in the next part.